Okay, the project that you're going to be working on is called the Object of Interest Exploratory Research Essay, or project. I call it a project because it's more than just an essay, but it's also just an essay. So the point of this paper, I think, for me, is to allow you to actually discover, actually explore things. So when we talk about research, sometimes we just talk about how you go on the internet and you find a few facts to back up your point about something. And that's not what we're going to be doing here exactly. The overall arc of the essay is that you're going to start with something simple, an object of interest, your OOI. Okay, this can be an object from your life or a food, something that's meaningful to you. We'll talk about choosing that in a second. Then what you're going to do is, through research and telling stories about that object, start to discover parts of your life and parts of the world that are all working together, that all kind of point to a theme, and that you can use this object as kind of like an entryway into discussing this bigger thing, this more abstract concept in your life. So the point of this paper then is to actually discover information that matters to you, to write things that matter to you. Otherwise, this paper is just a school assignment, and good job for doing a school assignment, but I want you to end with something that you're proud of and something that you feel connected to and that you care about. So when you turn in your first attempt and the final attempt of this paper, you're going to have 4 sections. I'll put them on the screen here. The first is a vivid moment section. Then the research section, the experience section, and then the connection to something bigger section. So I'll explain each of those in just a second, but each of those needs to be its own section in your paper with a heading and clearly labeled so it's easy to find them. Okay, so first, choosing your object of interest. That's the first task that you have, is to choose something. Hopefully you're at the point where you've got something already. We've talked about it in class, but if not, we're looking for specific objects, so a tangible physical thing that you've interacted with in your lifetime, whether that's like food or something else. So I have 6 things on my desk. I'm going to go get them and show you. Each of them would work. So here we go. I lied. I've got 5 things. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Each of these would work. So first is a Rubik's Cube. Next is a piece of olive wood that I took a chunk of olive wood from my campus in Arizona where I was going to school, and I cut it and I sanded it down. The next is a gear from a KitchenAid that I took out and I just put it on my desk. The next is a spinner CTR ring that my mom bought me. And the next is a 2 peso coin from Mexico, where I served my mission. Is that going to focus? It's not going to focus. Okay. Any one of those or anything similar to that would work as an object. I have a meaningful connection to each of them, but they're not like the most important thing in the world to me. They're things I keep on my desk that remind me of memories and stuff. And then the other option you have is to choose a food. And there's kind of 3 options with that. Either a food that represents you and your family because it's a totally normal, everyday thing, because it's something you do on special occasions, or if it some way relates to your heritage, right? So choosing those objects, that's kind of the way to go. For the sake of this video, I'm going to go with this Rubik's Cube as an object. I'm going to pretend like I'm writing it here as I go through the 4 sections. So let's go through the 4 parts. Each of the 4 sections serves a particular purpose in the essay. And so I'm going to talk about what each section is and how it fits into the bigger picture. So the first section is the vivid moment. What this is the beginning of the essay. It's a narrative. It's a story that you're going to tell about a vivid moment that you have with your object. So a specific and meaningful time that you interacted with your object is the way that I said it. So this could be the story of how you bought it, the first time you discovered it, when you and a friend played with it, when you realized you loved it, the last time you ate it or played with it before some other important event happened. So a last, a first, a most, something like that, right? Then you're going to tell the story of that. So the purpose of this section is threefold. There's kind of 3 reasons. First, it introduces yourself and your object of interest to your reader, right? They're going to know what you're talking about as soon as you start telling the story, because you're going to jump right into the story. The second thing that it does is engage the reader with something they can more easily care about, right? If I just wrote a research paper on the Rubik's Cube and just gave you a bunch of facts on the Rubik's Cube, it wouldn't be that great of a paper to write. But if I start with a story about my life, now you know there's a real person attached to this who cares about these facts and who wants you to know those facts. So it does that. And then eventually, this story should thematically fit in with your big idea that you put in the fourth section, right? So for my vivid moment, I would probably write about, so a Rubik's Cube is kind of a thing, like I kind of think of myself as a smart person, and I'd hear people doing Rubik's Cubes, and it's like this sign of intelligence. If you can solve a Rubik's Cube, you are a smart person. And I didn't know how to do it, and I felt like shamed and scared because I didn't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube. So there was one Saturday in Arizona where I sat down at the table, I got all this information that I had about it, an instruction book, my phone, and the Rubik's Cube, and I just did it for hours. And I figured out what an algorithm was and how it works and how you have to identify your problem and then solve the problem. And so now I know how to do it. I memorized the steps, and now I can solve any Rubik's Cube. But I can only do it in like a minute and a half. So that's kind of my record right now, is a minute and a half. Okay, so that's the story that I tell. That would be the beginning. Shoot. That would be the beginning of my essay, to tell that story about that Saturday that I sat down and finally taught myself the Rubik's Cube. And I tell it with much concrete detail as I could. Okay, so then the next section is the research section. So the purpose of this section is, more than anything, it's not to, more than informing your reader about cool things about it, it's to demonstrate to your reader that you've done work to understand the object that you're talking about. What I think in the assignment sheet I talk about, we just want to see an abundance of sources. We want to see that you've dug in a whole bunch of different places about your thing. So the research section shows, like, it demonstrates care and effort to your reader. And what that does is it helps them want to care about the subject the same way that you do. So what we're looking for is just like a variety of sources that give fun, cool, interesting facts about your thing. And here's the biggest rule of the research section. Don't include anything unless you legitimately, inside yourself, think that it's cool and fun and you want to include it. I don't want to see just copied, pasted, Wikipedia articles. Especially, here's the biggest thing I absolutely don't want. If you haven't read the paragraph yourself, there's no reason why you should ever put it in your paper. If you're bored reading it yourself, I'm going to be bored reading it. Your reader's going to be bored reading it. We don't care. You don't care. Nobody cares. We don't need to play that game, right? Just find facts that you care about and that you think are awesome and put those in your paper in your research section. So I think what I would research on, and I've done some research on it already, is how to do speed. They call it speed cubing, solving it as fast as possible. Right off the top of my head, I know there's a video where they built a machine that can solve it in like a quarter a second. I think the world record right now is 4 seconds. I might research, like, they have these pads where they have to put their hands on them. There's different techniques of solving. I use the slowest, worst technique. And I need to teach myself the other faster techniques if I want to get faster than a minute and a half. So I know there's all these, and there's different people who have come up with them. Like, that's probably what I would research, and because I'm into that right now. Like, I care about how these different processes work. But I'd probably look into, like, the origin of the Rubik's Cube. I'd look into these speed cubes, right? These have special, like, springs or elastic on the inside so that you can solve them faster. I'd like to know where those come from. This isn't an original Rubik's Cube. This is something else. Stuff like that, right? I don't know. I don't know what I would find, and that's the point of this assignment, is you don't know what you're going to find until you just go and start looking. And then all the cool stuff you find, you put it all in your research section, you cite all your sources and make sure that we know where it all came from. And there you go. That's a research section. The third section is the experience section. So what I want you to do for that is going to be another story that you're telling. But this one is the story of something that you do on purpose for this assignment. So, for example, the thing I thought of with this, I would try to beat my minute. I think minute and 26 is my record, and I haven't done it in a long time. So I'd have to practice again to get that fast. But if I could get under a minute and 20, that would be awesome. So what I would do for my experience is do that. See if I can beat a minute and 20, and then I would write about that experience. I would try to capture all the meaningful details, all the things about it. And that's not the only thing I could do. I could, take a Rubik's Cube apart. I've seen people who take them apart and then they reassemble them inside a jar that's too small for it. That might be fun. I don't know. Or even just take it apart. I can pull the pieces off. Or I could teach my kid how to do the Rubik's Cube. Lewis has always been trying to learn. No, yeah, my son Malcolm, he's always wanted to learn like the final algorithm. He can solve the first 2 layers and then the top algorithms for the top section. I could go teach him. There's a whole lot of things that I could do and then just tell the story of that in my paper, right? But the point is you create an experience for yourself on purpose about your object, with your object, where you interact with your object. So if it's a food, it could be making that food for your roommates, or it could be going to the store and buying the ingredients, or something, right? The point of this, again, is to demonstrate your reader your effort that you're trying to understand this, that you're doing work outside of this paper, and you're reporting on that work to understand and make sense of this. Okay, so that's the 3rd section, experience section. The 4th section then is the connection to the bigger idea. So the final section of your paper is where, in some ways, you kind of leave the OOI behind. So I've talked about the Rubik's Cube. I've done a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm leaving it behind for the 4th section. And now I got to start thinking, like, what are the themes of the stuff that I've talked about? So let's say my story is about teaching myself the Rubik's Cube. And then I find research about techniques to get faster. And then my experience is, like, trying to beat my score of 1 minute and 20. There's all these themes of, like, speed and competition and trying to be the fastest or the most, right? So I could just write my last 4th section on the idea of competition, of trying to be the best or the fastest. And like, I could do some research and like where that comes from. Like, why do we care about being the fastest? And then just off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, is that just an American thing? Do people in other countries care about being the fastest? Like, I don't know. See, like I'm coming up with all these cool questions and like bigger mysteries that I'm thinking about just because I did the work to think about the Rubik's Cube and like really look at it and understand it, try to understand it. And now it opens up this door to something else, right? So that 4th section of your paper, on your first attempt, the 4th section of your paper, the connection to something bigger, you're just going to try to make the connection. Then you're going to turn in your first attempt, and I'm going to give you feedback. And then you're going to hopefully notice some theme, right? And you're going to get to the end of it, and you're like, yeah. So at the end of the day, my paper is about being the fastest, right? Then my paper isn't about Rubik's Cube anymore. Now my paper is about why do we want to be the fastest? So I have to rethink my whole paper. So for the final attempt, I have to go back and think like, okay, how can I retell this story about me learning on the Saturday about being the fastest? I think the detail that stands out is the idea that like I was ashamed that I thought I was a smart person, but I couldn't solve a Rubik's Cube. So whatever drove me to that point, to that Saturday, like that's the emotion that I'm trying to get to, right? The fact that like there were other people smarter than me who could solve the Rubik's Cube, like that weighed on me. And so I would amplify that in that story. Whereas the first time I just kind of told the story, the next time I go back, I will retell that story in a way that amplifies those details of why do humans compete or something like that. I don't know. Same thing with the research section. I might go back and do more research about speed competitions and human fastness or something like that. I might even go look the fastest record for fastest runner and talk about Usain Bolt or fastest car or whatever this pursuit is for speed, right? And then the experience section, same thing with the first vivid moment. I would re-emphasize the idea of speed and I forgot what I said, competition, something like that. Okay, so that's how it works. Like you're going to write the paper in order to figure out what the paper is about. Then once you do that, you can go back and rewrite the paper, pretending that on purpose you always wanted it to be about that thing to begin with. So at the beginning, your paper is going to be about baguettes or about a swing set or a pine tree or a Rubik's Cube or a pair of shoes or something like that. The first time through, it's about that. The second time through, it's about the bigger idea that you come to, that connection that you make. It's a paper about, interconnectedness or capitalism or I don't know, something, right? Yeah. So there you go. The big warning that I'll give you is that if, as you're writing this, hopefully this video helps you get that big picture in your head about what this paper is about. So you always know the purpose of what you're trying to do and where it fits. But at the same time, you may feel like you don't know what you're doing while you're doing this paper, and that's a totally normal way to feel. If you're just like, feel like you're just shooting in the dark, like writing, like, I don't know what this is going to be, like, that's okay. That's kind of how it feels sometimes to write this paper. And that's how your research should feel, right? That you shouldn't know what you're going to find. If you know what you're looking for, then you're not going to actually discover anything. Okay, I've talked enough. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of this project, and good luck.